You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Are you interested in the parts of history that remain a mystery? Do you want to learn more about the historical myths and misconceptions used to prop up false belief today? I'm Nathaniel Lloyd. In my podcast, Historical Blindness, I delve into all of these topics, sharing puzzling tales from the past and examining hoaxes, conspiracy theories, and misremembered events that provide insight into modern politics and religion. Find out what's real and what's not when it comes to famous conspiracy theories, like those surrounding notorious assassinations and secret societies. Discover the weak and deceptive underpinnings of modern political ideologies and religious beliefs. Join me as I attempt to shed some light on our historical blind spots. New episodes every 2 weeks. Find Historical Blindness on most podcast players and platforms.
How would you like to challenge your little grey cells while reveling in the vintage perfection of David Suchet's Poirot?
If so, then the Labours of a Hercule podcast was made for you.
We're taking a deep dive into every episode of this masterpiece of television and giving you the clues you need to solve the case along with Poirot himself.
We present the case and you solve it.
Whether you're a detective in the making,
or if you just simply want to gush over the genius and art decadence of Agatha Christie,
then subscribe now to the Labours of Hercule wherever you get your podcasts.
Are the Scranton employees in the later episodes of The Office weirder because of prolonged exposure to radon? Is the cult film The Room based off a Shakespearean work? We'll discuss those theories later in the episode, but first, let's find out if the gargoyles and the Hunchback of Notre Dame are just a hallucination.
Hey, and welcome to Fan Theory Queries, where we analyze fan theories from all over the internet, but mostly Reddit. I'm Laura.
I'm Michael.
And I am Spencer.
So I'm bringing you guys a classic, beloved Disney film from 1996. We are going to be talking Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Ooh, nice. Good choice.
Beloved by who?
Exactly. I was about to say, as much as it's a good film, when was the last time you actually watched this?
Probably when it first came out, and never again.
You know, I actually watched it like a year ago, I think. Yeah. It was the first, to be fair, it was the first time I'd watched it in like 10 years, but still.
Okay. So this film came out in 1996.
Okay.
That's so crazy.
Man.
So, we'll go ahead and get into the theory, but I just have so many. We could branch off in so many different directions with this. So let's get going.
Awesome.
This theory comes from Race Car Lock, and it is that the gargoyles are a hallucination. I didn't think this was even a theory the first time I watched the movie. I thought everyone had read it like that, but apparently even Lindsay Ellis didn't think about this, which I had to look up who Lindsay Ellis is, and she's some kind of YouTuber. I don't know. And self-proclaimed Phantom of the Opera influencer.
If she didn't think of it, then I mean, come on.
Okay. Quasimodo has been locked in that tower for years. That level of isolation would probably break anyone. So in desperation, one day, Quasimodo's psyche simply locked onto 3 stone gargoyles the church had as decorations and made 3 wacky, humorous friends out of them simply to keep Quasimodo sane. Also, it doesn't appear that Frollo, despite his overall abuse, ever tried to smash down Quasimodo's childlike imagination, possibly due to neglect, and Quasimodo simply hiding his new imaginary buddies for fear of execution or something. I mean, think about it. Do they help out in action scenes? What about whenever Quasimodo's just interacting with the other characters? They're in the parade at the end, a bit, but they're still far away up on the tower where no one but Quasimodo even noticed them. It also makes sense that the gargoyles are so lighthearted and comedic in an otherwise bleak movie. What else would a child create to keep them from going mad with loneliness? Or rather, more mad with loneliness? We do see during the movie that Frollo has kept Quasimodo in a childlike mindset as well, lending additional credence to the theory. That's what I think anyways.
Cool. As it has been established, I remember that there was a hunchback guy, and that's about it.
In this film, if you look at like top billing, it's Jason Alexander, who is one of the gargoyles, and Demi Moore as Esmeralda. Those are the two people who are top billed. Not Quasimodo, not Frollo, a gargoyle and Esmeralda.
So let me ask you this. Because I need a refresher, does anybody other than Quasimodo interact with the gargoyles?
I was going to get to that down in my comments. So one thing I was going to kind of branch off with is it's something, I guess, about our generation becoming the quote unquote adults that with the onset of like social media and stuff and the kinds of jobs people can get now to make a living, there is a section of the, I don't know if you how you want to classify it, the zeitgeist or whatever, that are called Disney adults. Have y'all ever heard of this before?
Never.
I actually have.
Yes, these are people who like have season passes and go to Disneyland or Disney World all of the time. They have several different sets of Mickey ears. They wear Mickey or Disney themed clothing all the time. I mean, their lives almost revolve around Disney IP and these parks. They just go hand in hand.
And they're called Disney adults?
Disney adults.
Seems like there'd be a more clever or catchier term than that, like Disdults or Disnadults.
Now that's not to be confused with there's something else called Didney, and it's like the knockoff Disney stuff that's been printed in another country, but there's something wrong with it, like an eye is pointing the wrong way. And that's its own little subgenre of the internet, and it's called Disney. And usually it's got, I think its main logo is like a picture of Gaston that was misprinted, and he has a very crazy face. I'll have to pull that up for you guys later. It's real fun.
Wow.
And in fact, I'll post that on our social media when this episode comes out. Anyway, I just wanted to say, with all of that, I mean, most people will talk about their favorite movie or TV show. I don't see Hunchback of Notre Dame come up very much.
Nope.
No, it's very low on, like, I'll admit, I am not a Disney adult, but I do love Disney movies, especially that era of Disney movies, and Hunchback is probably pretty low on my ranking list.
I forgot about it. I forgot that it existed because, like I said, I've seen it maybe a couple of times when I was a kid and never since. And there's just not any really memorable characters or anything.
I wouldn't be surprised that you forgot it. I mean, memorable characters, I will argue that because this is based off of a work by Victor Hugo, but that's what I think lends to it being so forgetful. They took a very dark, this is one of Disney's darker animated films.
Oh, yeah.
They took a very dark subject matter and made it for kids.
They should have done that with Les Mis instead.
Victor Hugo's other work. Because it's funny. It makes me think of my first job out of college was working for a children's theater touring company. But for some reason, I don't know why, the show they gave us was The Amazing Adventures of Robinson Crusoe.
Oh. Wow.
They took the cannibals and made them into something called the Frowny Face Tribe.
What?
I know. To make it more palatable for children, but it was not the most popular show to choose from this company. But I think that also lends to why this isn't a popular film, is because it's very dark, and the only comedic relief is these gargoyles, and
they may not be.
I remember,
may not even be real at all.
Yeah, I remember whenever I watched it. It was like a year ago. Whenever it was, I remember thinking, "This is like a lot darker than I remembered from the first time that I watched it," which was about whenever it came out or so. But I was shocked at some of the content in it, and like the fact that it's a kids movie.
So that leads me to a question, unless you were not done with your thought.
I was just going to say, but despite all that, to kind of add to your point, Spencer, even though I watched it a year ago, I honestly don't remember most of the story at this point. Because
So
there's just not much memorable about it.
with it being based on a Victor Hugo novel, are there comedic relief gargoyles in his book?
Nope, they are totally created for this film. In fact, the gargoyles are named Victor, Hugo, and Lorraine. But it's funny about how they were trying to market this to children. I don't know, there was some kind of weird period there in the late 90s at Disney. I mean, we have this and we have Pocahontas, which both of those films, like both of those stories, can be a little tragic and much more adult. And we tried to make this for children. So much so that, you know, they also got they had their partnership with McDonald's. And so you got your Happy Meal toys, right? I remember the Happy Meal toys that I got from this film. They were these juggling balls is what they were, because the whole thing, you know, it's being told by this kind of court jester, Harlequin style performer, and he does juggling and stuff like that. And so they made these juggling balls, but each of the 3 balls was one of the 3 gargoyles.
Okay.
So I'll post a picture of those as well on our social media, so those 2 things can go together. But I remembered that vividly when I was reading through the theory, researching it, finding different things to go with what I wanted to talk about here. I was like, oh, I remember having these gargoyle balls. It was a weird memory that popped up. Anyway, it just seems like as much as Race Carlock it seems like they feel pretty passionately or definite about their assumption here. There's not much to back up their theory. Let's go into the comments here, and then I also pulled something from Disney Wiki about it as well. So,
okay, sounds good.
Our first comment is from Racorum. That sounds like part of the Bed Knobs and Broomsticks spell.
It does.
They said, I like this except for one thing. They were in the main action scene. As Frollo's men storm the cathedral, all 3 of the gargoyles actively fight back in ways that Quasimodo wouldn't be able to replicate. I think the film tries to intentionally leave it ambiguous.
Well, there's that.
Yep, we have that. And so Yosimba 2000 said, I don't think they are hallucinations. Aside from the final battle when Esmeralda and her goat first enter the bell tower and Quasi begins to show them around, one of the gargoyles gives kissy faces to the goat, and the goat clearly recoils in surprise.
It's just weird, though, because, like, if those are the only 2 instances of them interacting, like, are they never around when other people are there? Like Esmeralda?
Well, not many people are around Quasimodo. That's the whole thing.
Yeah,
he hasn't been with people.
Does she see them?
They kind of stay hidden from her, I think.
Yeah, I think they're trying to prevent, like, scaring her off.
Okay. They figure Quasimodo will do the job.
Oh.
It's horrible.
Okay, so I found this on the Disney Wiki when I was digging around about this. In the DVD audio commentary, Kirk Wise and Gary Trousdale, who are 2 of the directors of this film, and Don Hahn, who I don't know how he served, what capacity.
It's a great name, though.
Don Hahn. They suggest that it's possible that the 3 gargoyles exist purely in Quasimodo's mind and are in fact split off portions of his own personality created to deal with his loneliness. While this is only a possibility, it should be noted that the only other 2 characters in the first film to actually see a statue come to life are Frollo in the midst of his insanity and Jolly when Hugo tried to kiss him.
That's the goat.
Yeah. However, the true nature of these statues is open to interpretation given Hugo's endless flirtations with Jolly. And then there's a subpoint underneath that says, in spite of this, the trio's only appearance to ever follow this idea was the German musical adaptation, while most of their subsequent appearances, including the film's sequel, explicitly portray them as real creatures.
Interesting.
So I think they don't even know what they were doing with them.
I think they added 3 characters to try and make it more kid-friendly and be able to make toys. And they just didn't think about the overall repercussions of adding those characters.
I agree 100%. I mean, something was weird was going on at Disney in the 90s, I'm telling you.
Drugs.
With the
It's always
films that they
drugs.
made and I think the team that they had back then, there's just something going on.
Was there any other kind of like magical, supernatural stuff going on in the movie?
Oh, well, I mean, like, so what it talked about in that wiki thing was that Frollo, in the midst of his insanity, sees a statue come to life. That's like, there's a fire burning around him, isn't that? Or he sees fire burning because he's a judge and he kind of sees himself as a pious person, I think, if I remember correctly. And like, that's why he doesn't like Esmeralda, because she's quote unquote a gypsy and they're not holy and all this stuff. And he starts having these hallucinations almost going into, you could almost maybe, there's our Hugo tie-in. He might be a little Javert, if that helps you.
That does help me.
His fixation on this person is doing something wrong and they can't do this anymore and I will do whatever it takes to end them. Like, that's how Javert is about Valjean.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's how Frollo is about Esmeralda.
Okay.
Hugo has a theme there. He kind of does his own thing there.
All right. Well, I think I have arrived at my final rating.
Really?
Yeah, I think I have too.
Okay, well then, why don't we rate this theory? But before we do, Michael, could you go over our rating scale?
Absolutely. The highest rating that we have is genius. This is reserved for only the best theories, which we believe are better than the actual canon. The next step down is plausible. It's a good theory, it's believable. Unlikely is next. It's not a terrible theory, but pretty unlikely, as the name suggests. And then the last thing is preposterous. These are the theories that are just stupid. Basically, we're all dumber for having listened to them.
Okay, I'm shocked. I think this is going to be hard to rate, but yeah, y'all tell me. What do you think?
I think that I'm going to go with preposterous on this. I mean, you could make a case that the goat is actually recoiling at Quasimodo, and maybe Quasimodo is capable of doing the things that happen in the battle. But, I mean, I think they were just added there, and like we've discussed, for the purposes of making it kid-friendly, maybe they had the main script ready, and then Disney was like, no, put something funny in there. And so they threw these characters in there, and that's why they don't interact with anybody else. It was because that was not the plan from the beginning. And if they show up in a sequel, they portray them as real creatures. I mean, it makes sense to me that they're real in the first sequel. I don't know why they are in the first movie. I know sometimes we base theories off solely the movie that's being referred to, but in this instance, because it's a continuity thing, I would venture to guess that they are actually intended to be real characters, not hallucinations. Therefore, this theory is preposterous.
I will add they're also in Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah. I kind of changed my mind a couple of times with this one as we
You sound
were
like one of the
discussing
creators of this film.
Yeah, I think that I have to land at unlikely on this. I don't think it's quite preposterous for me because it's a decent idea trying to explain something that didn't really make much sense. But it's not, there's not a lot of evidence to really back it up. So I have to stick with unlikely.
Okay, I think I'm going to go unlikely as well, just because the creators and their commentary on, well, we thought they were just hallucinations, but the way that they're presented, they're not totally 100%. So the creators didn't even know what they were talking about. So I will also go unlikely on this as well. I don't feel dumber for having listened to this. I mean, it's a thought. It's an idea. It's a theory. So thank you to Race Car Lock for presenting this, bringing it out into the world for us to ponder and think about. However, we cannot agree with you. So sorry.
Okay, Laura, how much money do we have in our bribe listeners to rate and review the show budget?
Last that I checked, which was about 20 minutes ago, it was $15.
Okay, I'm going to take some money from Michael's 4K to increase it.
Hey, wait. 4K? Is that my retirement fund from this show? $4,000?
No, it's our budget to buy you a 13-inch 4K monitor. The only way you're leaving the show is for you to die or I fire you.
Wow.
Anyway, let's announce a giveaway contest. We want your reviews and ratings of Fan Theory Queries, so we've shuffled some funds around to provide an awesome prize to one lucky listener.
Oh, yeah? Well, what could be more awesome than my 13-inch 4K monitor?
A brand new pair of either AirPods Pro or Beats Fit Pro. Winner gets to choose.
Okay, yeah, that is more awesome than my 13-inch 4K monitor. So how do listeners enter?
Pay attention. All you have to do is rate and or review the show, depending on where you listen, and provide proof that you did it. Take a screenshot, tell us the name you used to leave the review, whatever is easiest. Oh, and if you've already left a review or rated us, you can still enter, just follow the same instructions.
Then get that info to us however you want. Either email us at fantheoryqueries@gmail.com, message or tweet us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at fantheoryqs, or go to fantheoryqueries.com/contest and fill out the simple form. You have until September 6th.
Wow. So you've made it super easy for people to enter, and all we're asking for in return is a simple review. Spencer, Laura, y'all are really smart.
No, you can't enter, and no, you can't have my monitor either.
You're tearing me apart, Spencer!
Are you interested in the parts of history that remain a mystery? Do you want to learn more about the historical myths and misconceptions used to prop up false belief today? I'm Nathaniel Lloyd. In my podcast, Historical Blindness, I delve into all of these topics, sharing puzzling tales from the past and examining hoaxes, conspiracy theories, and misremembered events that provide insight into modern politics and religion. Find out what's real and what's not when it comes to famous conspiracy theories, like those surrounding notorious assassinations and secret societies. Discover the weak and deceptive underpinnings of modern political ideologies and religious beliefs. Join me as I attempt to shed some light on our historical blind spots. New episodes every 2 weeks. Find Historical Blindness on most podcast players and platforms.
Okay, so on that note, Michael, you read my mind. You know what I wanted to talk about. The infamous movie called The Room came out in 2003. Many people have seen it. Many people have not. If you have not seen it, it's probably because you were told that it was terrible to stay away. But others may have told you to watch it for that very reason. And that's why we watched it. So
That's
The Room...
camp we're in.
Yes. The Room was written, directed, produced, starred in by a mysterious man known as Tommy Wiseau. No one knows where he came from. He showed up one day and decided to make a movie. And you can learn more about the somewhat true story of him and his friendship with the co-star in this movie, Greg Sestero, in a book and movie called The Disaster Artist. However, I would recommend the book because it is super duper funny, and depending on your feelings of James Franco, he's in the movie, so that might be a deterrent for you. But that being said, let's go ahead and get into this theory. The theory is called, the title of The Room is actually a clue about its real meaning, and the author is the mighty Heptagon. For all the mockery that gets heaped upon Tommy Wiseau's The Room for its inept direction, writing, acting, cinematography, editing, and, well, everything, it has surprisingly a lot in common with one of the most iconic and respected dramas in the history of the English language. To briefly recap, it's a tale of lies, betrayal, manipulation, distrust, and infidelity, and it's all about the downfall of a noble and gallant hero whose life is destroyed after he's betrayed by the person he trusted most, ultimately leading to his tragic suicide in the final scene. Weirdly enough, that description could also easily apply to William Shakespeare's Othello. And the similarities don't end there. Both of them feature a friendship that tragically falls apart, an ill-fated romantic relationship between two people from different cultural backgrounds, a prodding in-law, a guy who gets bitter after being passed over for a promotion, a character who tries to ruin someone's life by getting them drunk, numerous heated arguments that erupt into fights. You get the idea. The two works aren't completely identical, of course. Desdemona, unlike Lisa, didn't actually have an affair behind Othello's back. Mark, unlike Iago, doesn't willingly betray Johnny out of pure evil and spite, and Johnny certainly doesn't smother Lisa with a pillow. But the stories are broadly similar enough that it's not hard to imagine that one might have been inspired by the other. And considering Tommy Wiseau's background, it's not hard to imagine why the story of that play might resonate with him. After all, at its heart, Othello is the story of a foreign-born man who feels like an outsider in his chosen homeland. And as an immigrant famous for his love of American culture, particularly James Dean and American football, but often mocked as a goofy and eccentric foreign weirdo, it's understandable that Wiseau might see a little bit of himself in Othello. Whether you're a Moor in the 16th century Venice or a Polish-born guy with an unidentifiable European accent in 2003 San Francisco, being an immigrant isn't always easy. But as any fans of The Room will tell you, one of the strangest things about the film is its title. It's not particularly descriptive or evocative, making it sort of baffling that Wiseau chose it. After all, the movie takes place in numerous rooms, not just one. And none of them appear to be particularly significant to the story. So why is the movie called that? Simple. What is room spelled backwards?
Oh my gosh.
Because the movie is actually inspired by the story of Othello, the Moor of Venice. Wiseau set out to make a film inspired by Othello because he saw it as a parallel for his own life story, and he cleverly hid that fact in the title. It's called The Room as a subtle nod to the fact that it's actually a modern take on the tragic tale of the Moor. And before you dismiss my theory as crazy nonsense, it's worth noting there's ample evidence that Tommy Wiseau is familiar with the works of Shakespeare. If the disaster artist is to be believed, in fact, he and Greg Sestero first met when Tommy was reciting Shakespeare passages in an acting class, and he has a rather odd habit of reciting Shakespeare sonnets before showings of The Room. Here's an edit to the post. And as someone helpfully pointed out, he also once filmed a commercial where he quotes Hamlet while dressed in Elizabethan clothing. The evidence is everywhere. Too long didn't read? It's a loose modern retelling of Shakespeare's Othello, a story that likely resonates with Wiseau due to his immigrant background, and it's called The Room because room is more, spelled backwards. I love this. I think this is so much.
My goodness. Okay, so my goal was just subjected to his first showing of The Room yesterday.
Yep, I watched it in preparation because I knew that there was a room theory coming up, but I didn't know what the theory was.
And you had never seen the film, which you need in order to understand this theory.
Or at least have a better
Yeah.
sense of where it's coming from. Now, I'll be honest with you guys. I didn't tell you this. I swapped the theory at the last minute. The original one
I noticed the title was different.
Yeah. The original one I had was more about different idea behind the reason why Tommy created the movie. But I like this one so much better because there's not any concrete evidence against it, whereas the other one you could make an argument against it, but I won't get into that. Maybe save it for another time. However, let me start with this question. Michael, are you well versed in Shakespeare?
I haven't really done much with it since high school and maybe a little in college, early college, but I did get into it quite a bit whenever I was there. So I'm familiar with a lot of the stories.
I know we read Othello when I was a junior in high school. Laura, I know did you take a Shakespeare class?
I did. I took a Shakespeare class, and I have to say that I absolutely love the most recent Othello film starring Lawrence Fishburne and Kenneth Branagh. It is so good. It's really good.
I don't think I've even heard of that one.
Okay, well, since you've seen that, Laura, and you've also seen
it was a classic retelling. Didn't they just... There's even more recent one, I think, with Denzel Washington, maybe.
That was Macbeth, I think. So, Laura, let me ask you this. Block out any other future thoughts. Just stop right here. Stop your brain from progressing and answer this question. Can you see any similarities between The Room and Othello?
I mean, the way that the author pointed it out.
Did you ever connect them before this?
I never connected them, no.
Did you ever connect The Room to anything? Did you ever think, oh, this is like this movie, or he probably was basing it off of this?
I independently did not. I remember I thought that Tommy Wiseau wanted it to be like Hamlet, but it's not. It's definitely not like Hamlet, but I think he
it was a red herring.
Wanted it to be. I think the main reason I don't connect it with Othello is just that idea of there were prejudices against Othello because he was a Moor. And the way that Johnny is in this movie, that's for anybody that doesn't know, the uninitiated, Johnny is Tommy's character. I don't feel like there's any prejudice against him for being a foreigner.
That's a good point. Now, I will say, and to counter that, it's not brought up at all in the movie that he's a foreigner. Like that character could be played by anybody. So that's not part of the plot. Yeah. However, if it is his motivation because he feels like he connects with Othello on a personal level, because of that, maybe he experiences the same kind of, at least in his mind, the same kind of prejudices that he thinks Othello. Maybe he, again, like they said, it's somewhat based off, but not a direct adaptation. Maybe he didn't. I mean, I don't want to give the guy too much credit, so I'm just playing that out there.
We're already giving him enough credit as it is, mentioning him on our podcast. So I just have to real quick before we dive into comments and stuff, Michael.
Yes.
Did you know that this film has a cult following?
I did. I've been familiar with the idea of this film and like you said, the following behind it for a while. It's just I've avoided it because whenever I first heard about it, I did watch like a trailer for it, and I was like, no, I can't even stoop as low to even watch this one. But knowing that a theory was coming up, and with you guys' encouragement, I bit the bullet and watched the movie.
So there are screenings like it talks about in the theory. Still to this day. In fact, Spencer and my former theater professor just went to a screening last month and got their picture
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
with not Mark.
Lisa?
No, the actor who played Mark.
Oh, Greg Sestero.
Yeah, she got her picture taken with Greg at the screening. Greg and Tommy tour the country screening this film still. And people dress up in tuxedos, or the ladies dress up in red dresses. They bring plastic spoons and throw them at the screen whenever the framed picture of a spoon shows up. And they also, while they're standing in line, they have footballs, and they just stand like 3 feet apart from each other and toss footballs at each other,
okay,
like
Laura,
the scene in the alleyway.
I'm so sad. Laura suggested we watch this movie last night as a refresher, and I turned her down, and now I'm sad I didn't. That I did turn it down.
He was like, I can't watch that again. And I was like, oh man. So
it's definitely a fun group activity, just as long as you prepare yourself for the getting busy scenes that are awful.
The uncomfortably long and gratuitous scenes.
Which you saw this on YouTube. Did they blur any of that out?
No, it was all there.
Wow. Yeah, he was watching it with Italian subtitles. So I mean, the Italians, they're not going to blur it out.
No, it was all there, unfortunately.
Yeah, so skip that because it's disturbing. So do you guys have anything else to share before we get into the comments?
I was just going to say I wholeheartedly agree that you should read The Disaster Artist. Anybody, it is such a fun read.
Even if you haven't seen the movie. I mean, it's a great book.
It is.
Seeing the movie helps, but yeah.
And seeing the movie The Disaster Artist is okay, but the book was so much better.
Laugh out loud.
And I mean, so here's one thing I'll just say real quick, Michael, that you might not know about. He had he made a special rig for his cameras, and he filmed in digital and on film at the same time.
What?
And I don't know why.
HD, high definition.
That's the other thing. At the end of the film, since you watched it on YouTube, you might not have access to it. We have the DVD.
It's
There's
a special
feature. Interview.
Yeah.
There's an interview with Tommy Wiseau. And it's so good. And he's like, it's not a room, it's the room. And
further evidence that he's like, I completely forgot about that. But in this interview, he's like, it's because the question on the interview is, why is the movie called The Room? And his basic explanation is, it's not a room, it's the room. it's a place you can go, you can have a good time, you can have a bad time. And that was his explanation this time. But let's read some comments here and see what these people say. From Pokeball Z. While I think The Room more is a bit of a stretch, I can completely believe that Wiseau was inspired by Shakespeare. Again, going back to Laura's comment about something about him trying to make a Hamlet type movie. Then we have Genetic Shift. I do love this, but Tommy originally wrote The Room as a play meant to be set in one room, which leads to the title. He then adapted it into a gigantic book, which never got published. So he made that beautiful, blessed movie instead. But at the end of the day, Tommy is going to see this and claim it was his idea. So you probably just rewrote history. Then we have Craigular Person. I am warning you, trying to understand Tommy will only lead you down a gigantic wormhole. For your own sanity, I recommend you stop now.
Yes.
Final comment from the Mighty Heptagon OP comes back in and says, if you also believe that Lisa was intended to be the Desdemona to Johnny's Othello, her name could also be a subtle joke. Her name is Lisa, as in Mona Lisa, and she's based on Desdemona. Desdemona Lisa. Mona Lisa. Lisa.
Okay, that's stupid.
Okay, so it's interesting. I don't recall anywhere in the Disaster Artist about Greg, because Greg talks about a lot about him, because he and Johnny really were, or Tommy really are, and were best friends through after the course of this movie. Like,
they were roommates at one point.
Yeah, like he was Johnny's, keep calling him Johnny. He was Tommy's only friend. So he knows a lot about it, and that's what gives him a great perspective to write that book. But I don't recall anything about it meant to be a play. Do you?
I think I remember it meant to be a play, but I do not remember it being a gigantic book. I remember in Greg Sestero's book that he remembers Tommy feverishly writing the screenplay. Remember that he just banged it out on a typewriter in their living room. I mean, he was just typing all the time, and he was acting like a madman, pacing around and all this stuff. And I think it had something to do with him dyeing his hair in the middle of trying to... Yeah. That's a funny thing too, Michael, is that he dyes his hair black and he's like really anal about it. And I don't know. Well,
and no one knows how old he is. No one knows really where he came from. It's very suspicious, or not suspicious, very mysterious. It's just an enigma.
He is indeed. He's a mystery man.
And and no one knows where he got his money to fund all of this.
Yeah, he self-funded this whole thing.
Yeah. That was my first question after I finished watching this movie yesterday.
Who backed this?
Who in their right mind paid for this?
All of it.
So the hilarious thing, like,
and
the people
he bought
that they
the cameras
got for
too. He didn't even rent them.
I'll say one more thing, and then we'll get back into talking about the theory. But the people that they cast to act this out in the Disaster Artist is hilarious. Remember Chris R., like the drug dealer? Where's my money, Denny? That's Zac Efron plays that character. And then, of course, James Franco plays Tommy, who plays
it's his brother. It's his brother. It's James Franco's
plays
brother.
Mark. Who plays Denny? Remember who plays Denny? I remember that being.
It would be funny if it was
Seth Rogen is one of the
He's in the movie.
or directors
DP,
or a grip or something.
A line producer or something?
Yeah, he might be the line producer. That might be the hard part, is because they're not credited as the characters they played. Oh, because Allison Brie is married to Dave Franco. She's the friend, the girlfriend. That's one of our favorite lines to quote is about
Michelle.
Yeah, Michelle.
Chocolate is the food of love. And it's Josh Hutcherson was.
Yes, that's what it was.
Oh man, who plays Lisa?
What was her?
Aria Grainer. I don't know who that is.
I don't know who that is either.
I forgot Pimento was in this movie from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I don't know who. Oh, Peter. He's Peter, the guy with the Beta Breakers guy with the glasses that looks like the guy that gets his face melted off in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Awesome.
Anyway, as far as the theory goes that The Room is based off of Othello, and it's called The Room because room spelled backwards is moor. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I'm ready. Yeah.
I'm ready to rate.
Okay. Michael, you seem eager. Go ahead.
Because why not? Just like the whole movie. This is genius. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but the movie doesn't make sense. So sure. And honestly, I can't deny all of the connections that OP pointed out in this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's way too many for it to be a coincidence. Right. I don't like. Yeah, I think that Tommy is just some secret genius, and this was his
disaster artist, if you will.
Yeah, he knew that he would be able to milk this forever until he dies by doing showings of it with the cult.
All right, Laura, what about you?
I'm going to go unlikely on this. If we are looking at it being tied to Othello, like I pointed out, of a theme of that is being a minority and the struggles that come with that. Tommy in his personal life was, I mean, he was prejudiced. Like, there were people who had prejudices against him due to his being an immigrant. Why wouldn't he have written that into the script if he was trying to portray himself? And except that I think what he was doing here, because he was also, like we talked about in the theory, he's big into James Dean and all that stuff. He's trying to make himself into like an American, a true red-blooded American here. He's not showing any of his struggle into becoming an American. So that's why I think it doesn't really link up with Othello for me. Shakespeare, sure. Yeah, I can see some Shakespearean themes with all the drama and the, I'm pregnant. Well, no, I'm really not. And the mom. And
well, the results came in. I definitely have breast cancer.
That's, yeah.
Which I found another theory about that one anyway. But anyway, okay, I think that's a fair point. But I'm going to take that point and choose to look at it a different way. Laura, you're going to be in the minority this time. I'm going to go genius on this too. I was thinking plausible, but Michael, hearing you talk, and then I kind of talked myself into it. And normally, as far as I can remember, I won't give a genius rating unless I know for a fact that, or pretty close to a fact, that it cannot be debunked. Now, in this case, I'm not going to say that because I could very much go and do more research and find, oh yeah, he originally did mean to be a play. Even if he did mean for it to be a play, it still could be based off of Othello. But I'm going to choose to accept this as what is truth. And Laura, I think maybe whenever he was writing the story, he was conflicted in that he wanted to portray, he felt this, the similarity to Othello, but at the same time, if he thought that this might be his shot to launch a career or to be a big deal, he was conflicted, and he didn't want to come across as like, someone that he didn't want to give anybody else free ammunition to use against him in his real life, I guess. Maybe he didn't know how to write characters that were critical of him, What were you going to say?
He gave them plenty of ammunition just by making the movie.
We understand that on the other side of this, but in the mind of Tommy Wiseau, which is a dangerous place to go, as was pointed out by one
You
of
don't need to be convincing me. I've made my decision.
No, I'm not trying to convince you. I'm trying to just provide enough support for my decision so that people can't come on down the line and be
don't direct it at me.
Oh, I'm not. I'm directing at whoever's listening.
Now, Laura.
Because I'm talking about the point you brought up. Because Laura, I'm taking your point, but this is how I'm going to look at it. So yes, I think this is genius, and the similarities are there. And I think this person, the mighty heptagon, major kudos. When I read this, I was like, this is great. This is good stuff. Especially like, I know it's ridiculous. Room spelled backwards is more, but I mean, I could honestly imagine Tommy Wiseau doing something like that.
And see, that's why I went with unlikely, because I was like, I don't think I can go with preposterous, because he very well could come along and go, oh yeah, that's what I totally meant to do. I mean, because that's what he did with The Room. He thought this was going to be the next, I don't know, Citizen Kane or something. And then when he saw people laughing at it, he was like, oh yeah, I totally meant it to be a comedy. So, I mean, he will do that. He can do that. He is such a strange enigma that's why I'm like, well, I can't totally. It's almost like my last theory. The creators were ambivalent about were the gargoyles real or not. That's how it is with Tommy Wiseau too. He could say this one day and then that the next. It doesn't matter.
I think it's because, like I said, he's conflicted. I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt.
So to kind of segue from there, this next theory that I've chosen is also about trying to explain strange writing.
You never know, because knowing is half the battle.
What?
Oh, whoops. I know what she meant to say, but it didn't come out exactly right. I think she's saying, I am empty, so please dispose of me properly.
Oh, got it. So you want me to take both the red pill and the blue pill?
Exactly. I knew you'd phone home one of these days.
Please, 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 please. Sandwiches do have a way of putting baby in a corner.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Colons and pork chops.
How would you like to challenge your little grey cells while reveling in the vintage perfection of David Suchet's Poirot?
If so, then the Labors of a Hercule podcast was made for you.
We're taking a deep dive into every episode of this masterpiece of television and giving you the clues you need to solve the case along with Poirot himself.
We present the case and you solve it.
Whether you're a detective in the making,
Or if you just simply want to gush over the genius and art decadence of Agatha Christie,
then subscribe now to the Labours of Hercule wherever you get your podcasts.
So my theory is about The Office.
I love this theory. I'm so glad you picked it.
I'm a big fan too. The user who posted it has been deleted, so I'm just going to call them deleted. The name of my theory is why the Scranton employees become so weird in later seasons. So anyone who has watched The Office knows that the characters become caricatures of themselves as the series go on. Kevin goes from being a slightly dull but still functional accountant in the beginning to trying to glue a turtle's shell back together using office supplies. Dwight goes from the ornery guy who takes his job way too seriously to the guy who shoots a coworker with tranquilizer darts and slides his limp body down the stairs. The branch goes from a dysfunctional, believable office setting to getting so hopped up on espresso that they rip up the carpet. Why do the employees get so weird later in the series? The series has a running joke where Toby wants the building to be checked for radon, but no one ever takes him seriously. However, Toby was right. Over the years, the radon in the building caused many of the Dunder Mifflin employees to develop brain cancer, greatly altering their personalities the longer they worked in the building. The flanderization of their characters is the direct result of radon poisoning in their brains. This is why Michael is so different in the finale. His time in Colorado allowed his brain to overcome the effects of the radon poisoning, thus allowing him to mellow out and become more mature. Okay, so OP has a couple of edits to their original theory, but they're based off of some comments that happen. So do you guys want me to just jump into these comments and read through everything and then we can discuss, or do you want to start talking about it now?
Let's talk a little bit.
We can discuss.
Because I think there's no doubt this happens in the show, right? There's no denying that the characters get zanier and zanier, and for better or for worse. I think it's great that they develop a little towards that direction, but in my opinion, it gets too over the top and unbelievable eventually. But that's not the point. I do find it interesting that the characters, for the most part, that are not in the Scranton office are mostly normal people, or that spend a lot of time there. I mean, you look at Jan. When did she start getting crazier? When she moved to Scranton.
Yep.
You look at Michael, he got better when he moved away, like we talked about. I mean, look at David Wallace. I mean, he was one of them. Like, I loved that guy. And the fact that he's actually some kind of real finances guy is believable. I feel like he's just playing himself, that character. Yeah. He does a great job being the realistic one. With Charles Minor, he was kind of a jerk to begin with, but he almost felt like he got even more of a jerk as things went on, the longer he was there. I can't think of really, like, you look at Karen. Karen was only there for a little bit, and once she left, like, she never really got crazy.
That's what I was going to say about the Stanford branch. When they came over to Scranton, they all of them were pretty mellow and they got crazier. But that's also what this is saying is in seasons 1 and 2, for the most part, everybody working at Scranton was pretty normal. And then they started getting crazier and crazier. But I do wonder about like the other people in the building. We see them, like Bob Vance.
Well, I mean, I don't know many people that go around introducing themselves with the name of their company.
Bob Vance Refrigeration.
But we do see later all of the, they have the parking problem where the repair guys are taking up their parking spots and they call together I can't remember what they called them, but it was almost like a mafia meeting.
Yeah. It's like the Dons or whatever.
It was almost like the Dons is what they called it. But they called them all together to meet, and basically they're like, would you just tell your repair guys to stop parking there? The other people from the other offices seemed pretty normal.
Where does radon come from? It's like, is that from an air conditioner? I'm trying to think if it would be possible for just...
It is a gas.
For just the offices of Dunder Mifflin to be impacted and not the rest of the building.
If it does come Refrigeration, this might be where you're going with it. It might be coming from Vance Refrigeration and traveling upward.
Vance Refrigeration I know at least part of them is upstairs, so I don't know if they have a double-story office, because I remember them coming out of the office and seeing the Vance Refrigeration guys meet them at the elevator or something like that, unless I'm making that up.
I could have sworn Vance Refrigeration was on a lower floor.
So what I'm seeing from the EPA says radon comes from the natural decay of uranium that is found in nearly all soils. It typically moves up through the ground to the air above and into your home through cracks and other holes in the foundation. Your home traps radon inside where it can build up. So it's actually most prevalent in like the basement.
Now, what if because of maybe a slight structural integrity in this building, what if there's a crack that bypasses the other floors and just opens up on their floor? So they're the only ones getting exposed.
Maybe.
That sounds...
Maybe we should look at some other possible explanations.
A little bit contrived.
So, can I read the first comment?
Go for it.
The first comment is, "You are the silent killer. Go back to the annex."
Which is a quote from Michael to Toby when he first brings up radon is the silent killer.
Yep. All right, so Cario Dude says, I always thought they started acting weirder on purpose because they were getting tired of the documentary crew hanging around. They thought if they acted more dumb and more strange that the documentary would pull out of the project. And in response to that, user Gusty Goaty says, I thought it might be the other way around. They want to stay interesting enough so the crew finishes the documentary and they can be famous or something. Kind of like how reality TV shows are so over the top because the director keeps pushing the subjects into conflict or acting weird, or just straight up scripting it.
Good point.
That's a good point. Yeah. Eris Gray says, I just assumed the business went under, but the show remained popular. With no actual work and simply keeping up the appearances, the characters became characters of themselves. Instead of Dwight actually stressing over a meaningful workload, he imagines what, quote-unquote, Dwight could be stressing over and acts it out. As time goes on, the characters they play become almost completely detached from the people they are, and you have full Flanderization.
The thing about that comment, as we talked about before on the DeLangelo episode, is that it wasn't a show. This was for a single documentary that they aired after they recorded everything. So
yeah,
that the show remained unpopular. The show remained popular even though the business went under. That's not a good starting point for that theory.
Also, I think the introduction of Saber into the mix makes it unlikely that the business went under.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Unless that was part of the ruse. I don't know. But Count Mecha says, to me, Ryan was always the visual indicator of the quality of the show, or the groundedness of the show anyway. In the first 2 seasons, he was just this normal temp dealing with a pretty insane office. In season 3, he's a little bit more fleshed out. He's a salesman now, getting sort of diluted now with Kelly, but mostly believable. In season 4 is when he becomes a little more bizarre. He's the boss, addicted to cocaine, engaging in corporate fraud, and generally becoming extremely full of himself. By season 5 on, he becomes this ridiculous, amoral, insane, and delusional guy. I think his journey as a character also traces the route of the show itself.
It's true. I've had that thought before. Now, that comment doesn't necessarily speak to the theory, but it does provide some interesting thoughts in that, okay, he's a normal guy when he becomes a temp there, and he goes off to corporate and becomes whatever position that is. He becomes crazier, but that could be due to the cocaine.
Yeah.
And
it's
then
a heck of a drug.
He somewhat becomes somewhat seemingly normal when he works at the bowling alley before he's recruited for the Michael Scott Paper Company. Yes. And then he comes back and crazy again. So that's just some other things to think about with that.
Yeah. Okay, I have one more comment, and there's a response from OP, and Spencer, I want you to read the response from OP to this after I read the comment.
Good.
So, Kamasta says, okay, but radon exposure would result in lung cancer, not brain.
Every time I try to post something new and exciting, you make it not that way.
Bravo. That's exactly how I wanted you to do that.
That's because Spencer loves those quotes from Michael the most. Or, from Michael Scott the most was when he's doing something to Toby.
Why are you the way that you are?
Yep. Those are some of the best. Okay, so back to the main theory. I'm going to read the edits that OP made, and then we can kind of wrap this up. OP says, to piggyback on what user Jen Joes said, which I didn't read that comment. He says, it's also possible that the documentary crew is pumping radon into the office to manipulate the subject's behavior.
What? They're exposing themselves too. That's so weird.
Yeah, I don't know. And then his last edit is, many commenters are saying that the decline in quality happens to shows that last a long time. This is true. However, this theory is a rationalization about why, in universe, the characters behaved the way that they did. It is not meant to say that the writers wrote it this way on purpose. The writer's intent is irrelevant to this in-universe fan theory.
I hope that this isn't true, but it's sounding to me like OP felt bullied by the commenters, and that's why they deleted their account. Now they're deleted.
It sounds to me like OP is Toby.
Yes. So I just looked up, because I was curious, I looked up, the impacts, the effects of radon, and it's all respiratory. Lung cancer, cough, wheezing, coughing up blood, chest pain, nothing about mental...
Like asbestos?
Yeah, nothing about mental damage whatsoever. So some more thinking. I think I could probably come up with a rating at this point. I might have to do that with a caveat. I'm also open to discuss any more if y'all are needing to.
No, I'm ready to rate it.
Yeah, I think I am too.
Okay.
Laura, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'll do it. This is preposterous. OP, I'm so sorry you felt the need to delete your account. Thank you for your contribution to our show by writing out your theory and letting us have this content. It's fun to contemplate. It's fun to see somebody embracing their Michael Scottness so much.
Yes.
And obviously this is a person who loves this show, and there are so many people out there who do, and that's really cool. However, the points that you brought up are just kind of ludicrous to me, as far as like this was a documentary film that didn't air until taping was done. So the documentary crew would have like no influence over this, especially the edit about them pumping in the radon. Then they would be poisoning themselves. Doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
It could just be that these people have been working here for forever and are just going crazy. But I also have another theory that I'm going to record another time from a video that I saw on Watch Mojo as to why they get crazier. That could also be another explanation for this. It's not that I believe it more. It's just that there are plenty of people pondering this of why this happened. But it doesn't work for me. Okay. So preposterous.
I think if I were to make like a logical leap of out of everything that's been presented today, the thing that makes the most sense probably is that these people in this office wanted to get more attention, and so they started acting more and more outlandishly as the documentary went on. Maybe so they could have a bigger part in the documentary. I don't know. I think that makes the most sense. But as far as this theory goes, I'm going to give it a plausible with one caveat in that it's. I guess this is what the whole theory is based on, in that it's not radon. Is that fair, or should I say unlikely in this case?
No, you can.
Okay, because
No, it's up to you. Yeah.
I think
This is our show. We get to make the rules.
I think it's plausible that they could be poisoned. There may be something environmentally there that is impacting them, because I do need a reason. I mean, I have respect for the writers, at least up until a certain point, and I need a reason why to not lose my respect for them, as the same way that I lost enjoyment and interest of the show later on. How the kookiest of them all, with the exception of maybe Creed, Michael Scott, how does he turn into what we see there at the end of the show? And some may say, oh, well, he has a family now. He's got the love of his life. I'm like, no, I mean, he was with Holly and that in Scranton, that didn't change anything. And she's just as kooky as, she might be a little bit more reasonable as far as being a real normal person, but she's still just as kooky. And so I don't think that's enough to explain away his drastic shift in character. And so I think there's something there in the office, particularly, maybe it's the paper they sell that they're sitting by all day, every day.
Some sort of chemical.
Yeah. I think there's something there in the office building that impacts the people that breathe it in all day, every day. Andy lost his mind and punched a hole in the wall. When he came back, he went to anger management, sure, but it was a big old break from whatever was in that office building, and he was much more even-tempered. Mm-hmm. So maybe maybe, who knows what's in there. So with that caveat, it's plausible.
You could be right. That was a very big deal in the early aughts about workplace exposure to chemicals. We saw, those commercials from those kind of ambulance chaser lawsuit looking for lawyers, lawsuit seeking lawyers who were you exposed to whatever? Yep. You may be entitled to compensation. That was a big deal in that time period. So you very well may be right. It's just maybe not radon. So good job, Spence. What about you,
Thanks.
Michael?
So I don't know if you guys will allow me to do this, but I have 2 different ratings.
Oh, this
Yes,
is a
let's do it.
first.
Okay, so it's kind of goes along with what Spencer said. I will say that if we take out radon and replace it with some other chemical that would make more sense, then this is genius. But the fact that we don't really have any other option right now, and that they specifically say in the theory that it's radon, it's preposterous.
Wow.
So if you just swap that one little detail out, it changes it from one end of the rating spectrum to the other for me.
Which is hard to do because it's based on a quote in the show. That's what launches them off, is radon being a silent killer.
Yeah,
So
it's
true.
for me, it's too difficult to dismiss the fact that Michael changes so much, like you were saying, whenever he goes off and comes back, and the others that go off and come back, and the ones that are not directly working in the office all the time. It's just there's too much evidence to completely deny it, but there's not enough evidence to say yes, it's this.
Cool.
So
Consider
genius
yourself
and preposterous.
doubly rated.
Oh, fancy.
Maybe we should dip back, put some more money back into his 4K.
Please.
Well, Laura,
Spencer?
Michael,
Guys.
this has been a great episode. It's been a lot of fun, but it's time to bring it to a close. However, before we wrap things up, I do want to share this fascinating detail I found on Reddit the other day. I was just browsing around, looking up different room theories, and this little known movie detail that came across was so good that the user deleted their account because they got so many upvote notifications.
Really?
They pointed,
Wow.
they pointed out that the DCEU Batgirl movie holds the world record for longest director's cut, as it features over 90 minutes of deleted scenes.
Ouch.
Oh, that's dirty.
Oh, and can we say that also retroactively kind of messes with my theory from last episode about Michael Keaton's Batman about to get more screen time because he is now in those deleted scenes.
Maybe one of those deleted scenes had the Scarecrow in it.
And he's out of Aquaman, so yikes. But, that's a good one. That was really fun. Well, this has been Fan Theory Queries. I'm Laura.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Spencer. Join us next time as we analyze more fan theories and ask queries such as, did Harry Potter go see the original Space Jam movie when it premiered in theaters? We'll discuss that and other fascinating fan theories on next week's episode.
Fan Theory Queries is a part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like Art of History, Big Picture Science, and I Know What Scares You.
How would you like to challenge your little grey cells while reveling in the vintage perfection of David Suchet's Poirot?
If so, then the Labours of a Hercule podcast was made for you.
We're taking a deep dive into every episode of this masterpiece of television and giving you the clues you need to solve the case along with Poirot himself.
We present the case and you solve it.
Whether you're a detective in the making,
Or if you just simply want to gush over the genius and art decadence of Agatha Christie,
then subscribe now to the Labours of Hercule wherever you get your podcasts.